My name is Pravindra Subramaniam, metric number 254697. So I'm going to talk about the introduction. Alternate dispute resolution is a system intended to determine questions in a non-antagonistic way. Malaysia has changed itself from an economy reliant on farming and essentials item into an arising multi-areas company economy, likewise including the two administrations and assembly. The expanding pace of industrialization additionally implies a comparing increment in the quantity of industrial relations disputes in organizations. This was clear ascertained from the number of enlargement of work debates being alluded to the Malaysian Industrial Court for arbitrations. Next, we're going to move to the fact of the case. The plaintiff is Foster Wheeler E&C Malaysia Sdn Bhd and the defendant is Arkema Thiochemicals. The plaintiff entered into an agreement with the defendant for the engineering, manufacturing and project management services and materials and services related to the Lychee project in Kerteh, Terengganu, Malaysia. Foster Wheeler is responsible for engineering and procurement services, building management service and the supply of materials and equipment for the Lychee project under the said contract. The plaintiff hired different building contractors for the plant's physical construction, but under the construction management responsibilities under the said contract, the plaintiff was required to handle them. The plaintiff started settling procedures under Construction Industry Payment and Adjudication Act 2012 comparable to installment arguments about two cases. The defendant applied to court looking to remain the requirement of the arbitration choice. The defendant contended that there are merits in bona fide claims in the arbitration which it believed have a real chance of succeeding. Second, the defendant contends that the adjudication decisions contain material errors on which relates to the treatment of strictly confidential and without prejudice communication between the parties. Thirdly, the defendant contends that the prejudice that it will suffer will far outweigh any prejudice that may be suffered by the defendant. Arkema further alleged that Foster Wheeler has served another payment claim without the relevant documents and information. In a conclusion, for all the reasons submitted by the plaintiff as well as those discussed, the defendant's application for stay is therefore dismissed. The issue in this case was whether stay available only in limited circumstances as set out under Section 16 of CIPPA and whether threshold requirement of subsection 16 clause 1 had been met.
Moving on to the reason why the party chooses ADR in this case, it is because it has common binding characteristics. As for arbitration, it delivers a permanent solution by involving the contracting parties. Even there are two initial stages such as mediation, negotiation, and the last process will be arbitration to resolve the disputes between the parties. Next, the decision from the court. The High Court judge had concluded that there is no any pending in arbitration, thus dismissed the stay application made by the defendant for not meeting the requirement under Section 16 SIPA 2012. The matters raised by the defendant were all the defences raised in the initial stage of adjudication, which were dismissed by the adjudicator itself. To conclude, the High Court judge has allowed the enforcement for the application by the plaintiff, Foster Wheeler, with a single cost of 30,000 ringgit.
I will be presenting the arguments raised by the plaintiff. It was contended that the application for stay could not be granted as there was no initiation of arbitration in the first place itself. It was also pointed out that the matters raised were irrelevant to the matters enunciated in the application for stay. Thereby, the court has referred various cases before reaching the decision. On the first point, the court stated that the rule on statutory interpretation must be done in the plain and ordinary meaning of the provisions. The cases which has been referred are Ching Choi and others versus Collector of Stamp Duties and All Malayan Union Estate Staff Union versus Rajashekharan and others. Court also stated that in payment disputes, a speedy resolution is urged and need not wait until all the other available alternative modes of resolutions to be exhausted. Court thereupon in this case allowed the plaintiff's application on enforcement of adjudication decision. Thank you. Hi, now I'm going to talk about the arguments by Arkema Theochemical Sandrian Berhad. Arkema was seeking to stay the enforcement of the adjudication decision, and it has stated few reasons in their affidavit for what their stay must be granted. The first reason was in its bona fide claims in the arbitration, it insists that they are points which it finds have a real potential for success. Secondly, it is Arkema's argument that the decision of adjudication contains material errors, including purely confidential treatment and interaction between the parties without bias. Other than that, Arkema insists that the prejudice that it will suffer greatly exceeds whatever prejudice Foster Wheels might encounter. Arkema also argues that the justice of the case encourages an exercise of the court's discretion to grant a stay, in particular when the questionable action of Foster Wheels throughout the project period was investigated.
Hi, my name is Vijanesh Nagashankar and my metric number is 25448. Okay, today I'm gonna explain about the why ADR why the plaintiff move is correct in this case. So there was a counterclaim by the defendant in this case, that is Arkema Theochemical Sandrian Berhad, that the move by the plaintiff is not valid and not legal because it does not follow the multi-tiered ADR system. In this case, it must be followed by the process of ADR, and it must be started by negotiation process and followed by mediation and followed by the arbitration. In this case, the case had been moved earlier before the counterclaim by the defendant, so the process of claim by the Foster Wheeler is valid and legal in this case, and we had draft some agreements, mediation agreements in this case to settle this case. So it is followed by the request form for mediation, and next followed by the agreement to mediate, to appoint the mediator, and third is the form of Borang Pendaftaran Mediasi. This had been referred to the MalaysianMediation.com and from the Malaysian Bar. So it is settled by the way of mediation. Thank you.
Referring to the fact of the cases, we understand that Foster Wheeler's case was decided using adjudication process. Adjudication process or even arbitration can be difficult sometimes because the decision will be decided by a third party, which can be the judge of a court. Furthermore, arbitration and adjudication is more focused on legal terms in law. However, mediation is more to how to settle the dispute between the both parties by doing a discussion. For an example, Foster Wheeler and Arkema Construction can discuss about their issues. They can give on their argument, or maybe Foster Wheeler can compromise in terms of reducing the claimant amount, so it can be good for both sides. So there's no such thing as a winning and losing in the mediation process compared to arbitration and adjudication process. So we recommend both parties to settle the dispute using mediation process. Furthermore, ADR methods are much more easier and less costly compared to court proceedings. Furthermore, the information also will be private and confidential between the three parties. Thank you, madam.